Was a time of the preacher when a story begun. The choice of a woman and the love of a man, and how he loved her so dearly. He went out of his mind. Well, she left him for someone that she left behind.
Ta-da!
Hello, good evening.
Hey, everybody. Hope you can hear us okay tonight. We have a little bit of a different mic situation. That mic situation being that I did not bring the mic.
Yeah, so we are using...
I apologize. We've had a busy day.
We have.
And just got the video edited from our exploration earlier today, which you're going to see. But we're here live at the moment. This is live. It is not Memorex for those of you old farts who know what that means. Do you even know what that means?
Memorex?
Is it live or is it Memorex?
No, is that like...
Good. I'm not going to Google it.
What's Google?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So it's good to see you tonight. Those of you who are joining us, we're up to about 14 strong already. Hello to Elizabeth Parker and Victoria Hunt and Cindy Talty and Peggy Fogarty and Gail Speller and Eddie Henderson and Lyle and Sherry Sanquist and whoever else is joining on watch parties in other locations. These are just the ones that I can see. How's your week?
This has been a busy week.
Has been.
And for a lot of good reasons. One of those being the Guardian ad litem.
What a perfect segue.
It's like I do this for a living.
Yeah. Tell us about the Guardian ad litem.
Litem.
Good Latin
The
phrase.
Guardian ad litem. We briefly touched upon it 2 weeks ago, I think, on a Q&A, and then made a quick announcement on Sunday about it. But we had somebody reach out to us via email a little over 2 weeks ago, informing us that there were nearly 40 kids that were without sponsorship and asked if we can get involved in some way, some form. And I had never heard of the ad litem prior to receiving that email.
Jenny Wilson, who was a longtime Jenny, Simple Faith person, who now lives in South Florida. She is my most direct contact with the ad litem program. She was a volunteer. She was a guardian, which means that she was assigned as a mentor and guide for some of the children who are in the legal system. And so we miss her, but she introduced the church. And there may be some others, and if you're watching tonight, and hey, Hope, there's Hope McCormick in there tonight. Hey, Hope. But Jen introduced it to us, and just a great service. These are kids in the legal system. This does not mean they're in trouble. It means their guardians are.
Right.
And they have been sort of left in this no man's land of care, and so we're trying to take care of their Christmas for them.
Right. So by the time all was said and done, by the time we got back to them, we ended up with having 22 kids available, and we took those on. And so far, we've had a handful of different people reach out on how they could help monetarily or whatever. And so we encourage that. We hope people can continue to be involved in it. We've had a couple reach out about taking on one of the lists, and that's something that I can do if you just send me an email. Let me see if I have this available on here real quick. Yeah. So if you send me an email at garrettmchugh@gmail.com and you want to me to provide you with a list, I would be happy to do that. There's not a ton of items on these lists, but these are wish lists for some of these kids. Ages range from anywhere from 12 months to, I think, 10 years old. And we're just trying to provide them with some simple things that they would like. That it doesn't mean you have to get every single thing on their list that they're asking for. But just to provide them with a wonderful Christmas, a great opportunity to give back to the community. I've already recruited a couple different people that are willing to pick up a handful of things on the list, and yeah, it's just a really cool opportunity for our people to get involved.
It's fantastic. I appreciate you taking care of that, and uh, these children certainly will not have a Christmas. This has as I think it's in the first. We actually had two videos today. One is our session tonight, about 40 minutes with Emily Proctor, and we did a second bonus time video that we'll show you at some point in the future. And she was talking about caring and sharing where she works, and that they had 100 additional families this year for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And that's sad to say, not a product of their outreach as much as it is a result of the need here in 2020. And we have always cared for a few children here and there at Christmas time, but this is the largest group of children we've been asked to take.
That was indigestion, not emotion.
No, it was a hiccup. This is the one.
Yeah.
This is the largest group of children we've been asked to take on, so it's a pretty big deal, and we appreciate your help. Other announcements though, because we got a great video.
Yeah. So you've already touched upon Emily Rose Proctor as our guest. We'll segue into that, but next week, I love this. Based on responses from a couple weeks ago on the BIBLE.
That's the book for me.
Part 1, we had a bunch of people ask us, can we do another one? And yes. And we will ask Emily some questions in this video that will kind of segue into our conversation for next week, which is BIBLE Part 2.
BIBLE.
I forgot what the second part of our title was.
BIBLE. What does it mean to me or something? I forget.
No, it was rhyme. Yeah, I can't remember now.
That's okay.
But anyway,
we're gonna talk about the Bible.
So yeah, we'll you might pick up on some of those questions that we asked her, that you might find surface in next week's part 2 of the BIBLE, and then on December 16th, so 2 weeks from now, we have another special guest. If all things pan out correctly,
don't say pan. Reminds me of pandemic.
Yeah, we don't. And unprecedented. But yeah, December 16th, we have another special guest.
It's going to be great.
And lastly, do you want to talk about Christmas Eve there, Ronnie?
I will. I'm actually trying to reply to a couple people in our comments. I will take a break here from doing that. We've decided, because it's 2020 and everything that's going on, and the difficulty that the holidays prove to be, that we will not have an in-person Christmas Eve service this year. Our Sunday morning services, while we're having anywhere from 35 to 50 people, and I just noticed that this past Sunday we've had over 400 people watch our service online through Facebook alone. I don't know what the numbers are on YouTube.
About 200.
200 more. So 600 people are watching and connecting online. 10% of that number or less is gathering in person. And so we will not have a service on Christmas Eve. Please spend it with your families. Please wear a mask when you're in a large group. Our numbers, as we were coming to air tonight, the numbers in our country are the hardest numbers, the most hospitalizations from COVID-19 today than any day since the pandemic began across the country. I have a half a dozen family members back home, extended family, 2 uncles, 2 aunts, a cousin that have COVID. One is in the hospital, and it's a pretty serious concern. And so we're not going to do that this year. There's a lot of things we've had to flex and give up on this year and trade off. This is going to be one of those things for safety's sake, and hope that folks have a quiet Christmas.
Yeah. Nancy just pointed out that we had 67 shoe boxes for Operation Christmas
Outstanding.
Shop, Samaritan's Purse. So, this has just been an incredibly odd and roller coaster year, with people's generosity and in the midst of everything going on. And we'll actually touch upon that at the end of the year and share a little bit more about that. But what another incredible blessing, for our people to be involved in and be a part of. 67 boxes.
Well, in addition to that, we will help these children. The church will likely make up any difference that individuals are not able to take on. We've already set records this year for the amount of resources we've given to individuals and organizations, over $100,000, and we are poised here at the end of the year to probably 25 to 35,000 more. The need is so pressing, and that doesn't put us in any type of financial jeopardy ourselves. We'll hold some funds in reserve because the winter that is to come, January all the way into spring, is still going to be a difficult time. And so I think that's probably a good segue to talking about caring and sharing.
Yeah, do you want to share a little bit more about Emily?
I met Emily Rose Proctor 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Met him in the home of Bill and Ann Schultz. We had dinner together. Her husband had just came as pastor and rector of the Episcopal Church, Cross the King Episcopal Church. And we had dinner together. Loved both of them immediately. One small son then. Now they have 2 children. And a couple years ago, she had it on her heart to start a ministry for the poor and for the needy as a community chaplain. And she'll tell most of her story tonight. And she's just a fantastic person. I tell you, we learned a lot tonight.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
afternoon.
That's fun.
Our conversation took several twists and turns that I did not know about and did not anticipate, as she told her own spiritual journey, how she moved really from church kid to agnostic student in college,
Taking philosophy classes,
to a radical conversion, and then on to seminary. And you'll really enjoy this tonight, and I hope you'll stay with it. She's about 40 minutes here, and we'll come back and wrap up at the end. Thanks, everybody. Are you recording now?
Yep.
Hey, everybody. Welcome tonight. As we probably said in our introduction, though we haven't done our introduction yet. We're here tonight with Emily Proctor, and so excited for her to tell you about her work as a community-based chaplain right here in South Walton County. And obviously, we're here at the church on this beautiful afternoon. It is Wednesday afternoon, so just 3:20, a couple hours before we'll be talking to you live, and we're going to do a follow-up after the video and do a little reflection on what we've heard today. But welcome.
Thank you.
My friend Emily Proctor is here, and just found out that she and I share a similar personality type, which I knew, but now we have confirmed it.
I noticed that you said your friend Emily is here, but you didn't say anything about me.
Garrett's here. He is my friend as well. So, how are you, Garrett? I'm sorry that you suddenly felt neglected because we've been together for an hour already, and I just
It's true.
assumed that you were here.
No, I'm good. I'm Emily, so happy to have you here. Ronnie and I have been chatting for a while how we needed to have you on here, so it's just good to have you here, and I'm sure folks will enjoy our conversations and learn a little bit more about you and what you do. So thank you again for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
How long have you been in Walton County now?
Almost about 5.5 years. Yep.
Do you remember when our families first met?
I think it was at the home of Ann and Bill Schultz.
That's exactly
in our
right.
neighborhood.
Ann and Bill are double dippers. They honestly say we go to the Episcopal Church for the beautiful liturgy, and we come here for the music, which is hysterical, but sweet people, beautiful people.
Yes,
They've sold that home.
They have
since we were there and had dinner, and you just had one young.
That's right.
Son then.
That's right.
And now you have 2 children,
now
right?
I have 2. Yep, they're 2.5 and 4.5. So if I have bags under my eyes.
In fact, we moved it to the afternoon because her husband Richard, who is also a pastor, and we'll talk about that. Richard, you're going to watch this, man. Buck up, brother. Put those kids to bed. One thing I love about Richard too is he's also a drummer and a musician, and we'll have him on sometime.
Yeah.
And grill him good because she's so diplomatic and
he's a drummer.
He's a drummer and loud and ready to tangle with you. So that's just him, but we love him too. But enough about him. Well, not quite enough about him. Tell me about your experience. First of all, you're both ministers parallel traditions, similar traditions in some ways, but different denominations altogether, right?
Right. Yep. He's an Episcopal priest, and I'm a Presbyterian Church USA minister. So, we met in seminary. He has a family history, his grandfather was a Presbyterian minister, and his great-grandfather was a Presbyterian minister, and he has several other Presbyterian ministers in his mom's side of the family. So he ended up at a Presbyterian seminary. So that's how we met. I think I got ordained 2 years before he did because he had some process stuff to do.
And he moved for credentialing, though. He moved to the Episcopal Church out as he came out of seminary. He just found that to be his path.
Yep. He grew up in the Episcopal Church in Tallahassee, and he did experiment, while he was at seminary with the Presbyterian Church, but the Episcopal Church was home. And so when he, graduated, he realized, through that process that he was Episcopalian and wanted to be an Episcopal priest. He has a deep love for the prayer book and the liturgy. So, he had to do an extra year of seminary in New York City at an Episcopal seminary.
I read from the Book of Common Prayer a lot. Just, concluding prayers, communion prayers, and people will say, "Oh, that prayer is so beautiful. Did you write it?" And I'm like, "No, that's the Book of Common Prayer," because it has so stood the test of time.
Yes.
And that's in my tradition. That's something we didn't use. Did you grow up Presbyterian?
I did, and we have a Book of Common Worship, but I don't think we don't use it as diligently as the Episcopalians use their Book of Common Prayer. But we have a new one out that I think is full of beautiful liturgy. Too. So, I grew up in Dothan, Alabama.
Oh, really?
Just 2 hours from here at a Presbyterian church. My grandfather was an elder there. And actually, my grandmother was United Church of Christ.
Oh, wow.
And they went to different churches. And my mom grew up alternating Sundays, but she ended up picking the Presbyterian church. So that's where I was raised.
And what seminary did you attend?
Columbia Theological Seminary in Atlanta. Yeah, which is a PCUSA seminary. And it's interesting. I just watched a video because Richard's grandfather was a homiletics professor there.
Oh, wow. That's
and they're doing this video. They're making these videos in this movie about Presbyterian ministers who were active during the time of civil rights and integration, who took sort of quietly, activist stands in their own congregations and maybe paid a price for it, just trying to tell more of those stories. And so they did one about Richard's grandfather, who resigned in South Carolina after his church voted not to have open worship.
There's a video of this? Can you send the link to us and we'll post it in our... If you find it, we'll post it on our notes.
I have to make sure, because I think it's like in the works, so I'm not sure there's a public version yet.
Oh, wow, you've seen the rough draft.
Yes.
Well, when you get that, send it to us.
But they also did one, I just saw the one that they made about the minister who was the minister when my mom was in elementary school in Dothan, and he talks about... the process of registering to vote and what that was like, having to go out in the country. He was threatened, somebody called the church to threaten to burn down the church, but someone had tipped him off, and so he recorded it, and he had a congregation member in the FBI.
Oh my goodness.
Who I remember, he was quite old when I was growing up, but I had no idea he was an FBI agent, but he was, and he took the recording straight to his office, which was good, because then the guy's son showed up at his office to demand the tape once he heard it was recorded. I mean, just crazy stuff that you would never...
That's wild.
To hear someone talk about it, having experienced it, like the difference in he tells a story about the sexton coming to him not being able to pay his property tax, and the sexton was African American, and he looked at the property tax and was like, this can't be right. This is more than double what mine is. And he went to the courthouse or wherever, and they're like, oh yeah, that's how it's assessed. That's how we keep people.
That's how we do
and
things.
And he made them
here.
change it. I mean, and he was called out, they had some big rally, and he was called out as one of the 3 pastors they should be run out of town.
What a history.
I know. My tiny little Presbyterian church in Dothan, Alabama. Who would have thought?
I did not anticipate this turn of conversation. But that makes sense for why you've arrived where you are. Now, certainly not every denomination or church fellowship has female ministers, but you are a female minister.
I am.
And ordained, as credentialed as any vestment-wearing man, and you get to preach regularly.
I just celebrated my 11th anniversary of my ordination.
Congratulations.
That's great.
Congratulations. Yeah. Were you able to have a portion of that ordination service at your home church where you grew up?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Good. I was hoping so. I'm not completely versed in PCUSA about if they're able to do that, but that's fantastic. I was ordained in my home church, which was a lot longer than 11 years ago. but it's neat. It's neat to be
it
able
was
to do
very
that.
special. It was very special.
Now, Ronnie, you
Go
stole
ahead.
my
sorry.
first question.
I got suddenly engaged with
yeah,
this.
there's so much there.
I love that.
He asked about your church tradition growing up in the church, and at what age did you feel that sense or calling into ministry?
It's funny. It happened in college. I went to college in Massachusetts at a pretty secular college, and when I went, I was feeling pretty secular myself. I went to the Alabama School of Math and Science in Mobile and took some philosophy classes and wrote a paper on why it was illogical to believe in God.
Oh, I love this.
and
I want to read that.
and get this, presented it to my grandfather's men's group in Dothan.
Oh, wow.
He was part of this ecumenical, diverse men's group that met every Wednesday morning for breakfast, and they were Republicans and Democrat and atheist and fundamentalist and just the whole gamut, Presbyterian, and they would talk.
That sounds like a joke.
They would take turns presenting on the topics of ethics, religion, and politics. So all the things you're not supposed to talk about, they would take turns presenting and asking each other. So they invited me to be a guest speaker, and that's what I presented.
I love it.
Do you still have that?
I don't know. Possibly. I definitely have some hoarding tendencies, so it's possible it's in a file somewhere.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So when I went to college, I thought it was illogical to believe in God. I would say I was probably agnostic, if I'm really honest. But I was, as Ronnie and I discussed, being
not apathetic.
not
Obviously
apathetic.
not apathetic.
Right. Not apathetic. And being a 1 on the Enneagram, so being a perfectionist, reformer type, I was super achiever in school, in my church, in all the areas of my life. And so I ended up being tapped to represent my presbytery of South Alabama at our denomination's General Assembly in 2000 in California.
We can't send her. She's an agnostic.
Well, they
Did
didn't
you
know
get any
that.
of
They didn't know that. I didn't really advertise it. I just sort of quietly, dropped out. So I was like, oh, free trip to California.
Yeah.
This will look good on my resume.
Who wouldn't?
Right.
I'm for that.
So I went and had one of those Holy Spirit experiences. There was a protest happening at the outside the worship service about midway through the week, and I went. They were going about their protest in a very respectful way, and they, everything was. They educated us ahead of time about who they were, why they were there. They arranged everything with the police. They had their permits, all that kind of stuff. They weren't going to disrupt anything, and so I thought, we have a joke in the Presbyterian Church that we have to do everything decently and in order. And so, often to our detriment, but so they were being so decent and in order that I thought, I'll go shake their hands, and they were protesting on behalf of what they felt were exclusive policies in our denomination for LGBT inclusion, and so.
And this
was in 2000.
Yeah, this is 20 years ago, so this is not.
Yeah.
The summer of 2020.
Right. No. This is 2000. And so I went to shake their hands just to say, I appreciate the way you're going about your protest. And again, I'm a very
logical,
non-emotional. I've gotten a little more emotional.
Since having kids.
Since then. But very much in my head. But I felt when I shook that demonstrator's hand, I felt what felt like centuries of pain and anguish caused by the church, like washing over me. And the guy whose hand I was shaking was smiling and saying, "Oh, thank you for stopping by." It wasn't like he was emoting at me. And I heard this voice in my head say, "Whatever you do to the least of these, you do unto me." And I knew that scripture from Matthew and 25. And it's so weird. At 20 years, like I still get chills every time I tell the story. And I just felt like I was looking Jesus Christ in the face. And he was saying, which was weird because I didn't believe in Jesus at the time. I would say of the Trinity, he was the one I felt least, I felt like I didn't buy at all, Jesus. I could get my head around a loving creator, maybe a loving creator with a spirit, but Jesus, I did not get. And, but there he was talking to me, looking me in the face, saying, "Here I am outside the church. What are you going to do about it?" I'm like, "What? Me? What? How is this my responsibility?" But I started crying, and so I was just like, "Okay, God, I see you, I see you, I see you." And I just went around the circle and shook all the demonstrators' hands, and I thought that was the end of it. And then somebody, actually the night before that happened, somebody had introduced themselves to me after a committee meeting. We were all on a committee, and so I was on the theological issues committee. And somebody introduced themselves to me afterwards, and when they found out I went to Williams College, said, "Oh, a good friend of mine is about to start there as your new chaplain." And I was like, oh yeah, like I vaguely heard we were getting a new chaplain. And he was like, "Oh, you should meet him. He's here at this assembly in California." And I was like, "Oh yeah." So I found out where he was sitting. We introduced, and I went with him. Oh, he was wearing a pin that was a group that was aligned with pro-LGBT rights. And so I kind of saw it and was like, "Oh, maybe I'm leaning in the same direction as you, just had this weird experience." And so I went with him to that meeting just to check it out, and ended up speaking on the floor of the assembly about, there was an amendment that came up saying you can't pray for any couple. It was like you can't invoke the name of God in blessing on any relationship that's not fidelity, chastity and singleness, or fidelity and Christian marriage between man and woman. And it was vague enough that I thought, can you baptize the baby? Can you pray with a couple? It felt a little too far to say when you could not pray for people. So I didn't know at the time what I thought or felt about the issue of sexuality, because it really wasn't on my radar at all when that happened. But I ended up speaking on the floor saying, I don't think we should dictate from a national level who we can and cannot pray for.
Now you sound like a Baptist.
Well, I'd written out my speech like a one. I'd written out my speech ahead of time, so I would say exactly. But before I said what I had written, I said, as someone who's considering ordination, I don't want to be ordained into a church that tells us who you can and cannot pray for. And then I sat down and I turned to the person next to me, who happened to be the seminary advisory delegate from Columbia Theological Seminary, who was from my presbytery, and I was like, what just came out of my mouth? Because 2 days earlier, I didn't even believe in Jesus, So I was not considering ordination, by any stretch.
I have been converted and called to ministry in 48 hours.
Yes, of the amount of it. So it just came out of my mouth. And I was like, okay, when I get back to college, I've got to figure out what the Bible says about sexuality. I've got to figure out, I didn't even know our denomination has this thing called the Book of Confessions, which is a collection of faith statements, starting with the Apostles' Creed, going through the Reformation to, today. And I'd never heard of it before. So I was like, okay, I need to read this thing and see what is it we believe, and do I agree with that? And so, of course, I enlisted our new chaplain. I was like, oh, great. I just met the new chaplain. He can help me. And so I did an independent study on the issue of sexuality, and actually it was in rereading the gospel and Acts and looking at the Bible through this lens of how to make sense of this controversy that was happening in the church and in the culture through the lens of the Bible and through especially Jesus and the Gospels, and that I just like got on fire and was like, this is not the Jesus I remember from Sunday school. Like, this guy he's like, love your enemies. Like, who does that? Like, nobody. That is the most insane countercultural thing I have ever heard. Like, nobody does that, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. Who does that? Like, I haven't done that. Like, and so Jesus for me became this really compelling and a little frightening,
very frightening.
Person that I just like needed to keep learning about and, having listening for and listening to, and the chaplain who I was asking to kind of guide me through this study, and turned out to be a gay partnered Presbyterian minister. And so then when I got to Acts and got to that passage in Acts 10 where Peter has this dream and God says, don't call unclean what I have called clean, and then these Gentiles show up at his door and they're filled with the Holy Spirit, it just felt like this blueprint for what I had just experienced in my own life. And so I was like, all right, I give up. This is real. Like I gotta.
I didn't know any of this. This is incredible, and that's a deep dive that you've just given us in 15 minutes.
Sorry.
No,
like a fire hose.
No, that's good. We're standing here on fire. You go to a church. You're doing your work. You don't tell that whole story every time, obviously.
No.
But that encounter with Jesus has certainly shaped everything up to this point.
Oh yeah, it was like my life just went. I mean, I didn't really know. I was like, oh, maybe I could be an English teacher. Maybe I'll work in an art museum. Maybe I'll be a counselor, right? And then it was like, whoop. But then I found out I could kind of do all those things in ministry.
That's true.
So yeah, I could study texts and write and counsel people. I am a poet. Yeah.
I've heard you read here locally.
You have?
Back when skies were blue and there was no COVID.
Yes.
At 30A, sorry about that, 30A
Songwriter
Radio.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is fantastic. I'm interrupting your line of questioning. I'm sorry.
So that's when I decided to go into the ministry, was after really when I did that January study, after that summer kind of mind-blowing experience. That's when I decided. So I did take 2 years between college and seminary.
That's a remarkable story. I mean, just that's wild.
Well, it's funny, and part of the reason I really trust that it was God and not my own, imagination, just I don't know, some kind of subconscious, manifestation of my own desires. Is because at that point I didn't know anybody who was gay. Like I didn't have any personal interest really in that issue. And B, I didn't believe in Jesus. And then
just a small problem.
This is a Pauline conversion.
And the way it is, and the way it happened is so funny, because all my secular liberal friends at Williams were like,
what is wrong with
creepy
you?
evangelical Jesus, don't talk to me too much about. and then everyone who at Williams I knew, who was most of the people at Williams I knew who were Christian, were like, don't talk to me about LGBT. If your story involves LGBT inclusion, it is not. I can't even listen to it.
So did you feel estranged from, in the midst of that, estranged from the polarities that you were
I mean, it's an interesting position to be in. What we ended up doing is because the only Christian groups on campus at the time were more conservative or Catholic. So we just started one that was more open to questions. Yeah. So we were very small. It was 10 of us. But we would meet for dinner and discussion. And
well, I have to know this. Tell me this, just for my own edification. When Richard came here to the Episcopal Church, were you both pursuing a pastorate and saying, I'll go with whoever gets the pastorate, or was that a conscious family decision?
No, he followed me to Baltimore. So when it came time for us to graduate, we weren't sure what was going to happen with us because we just started dating a few months before, and he was going to stay in Atlanta and do a CPE residency at a hospital and do his ordination process thing with the Episcopal Church. And I applied for some of those. And then actually, it's so funny. Another weird God story is I went with him that Christmas to right after we started dating to visit his sister in Baltimore. And we went to their Presbyterian church the Sunday they announced they were looking for an associate pastor.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, ooh, like it was a church that was very different from any church I had ever seen before. And I was like, so what I decided was I was going to apply to CPE residencies in Atlanta and either stay with him, or if I got my dream call, if I like found a church and a call that really felt like the perfect right fit, he had told me if I stayed in Atlanta for him, he would break up with me for sure. It would be too much pressure. So I applied for the Baltimore job and loved it and got it. And it was a sister's church, so I figured we had some chance. You know, he had another reason besides me to visit Baltimore.
Right.
So yeah, and the rest is history. So he followed me to Baltimore after he completed his additional year at General, and then he got interested in a call after he'd been there for 2 years and I'd been there 4 years. He got interested in a call in Jacksonville, so we moved to Jacksonville, and then 2 years into that, his head of staff had to kind of unexpectedly retire. And in his tradition, that generally means the associate also begins looking for, something else. And so, again, another weird thing. We were here on vacation that Christmas, and he visited the Episcopal Church and found out they were looking for a pastor.
And Father Cooper had left, and
So he applied here. So we came here for his job as the rector of Christ the King, and I had no idea what I was going to do.
But that didn't take long. Well, it took a little while. It took you a couple years to sort out, and then you had probably not the same type of epiphany as Jesus showing up in the street with you, but you had this sense of seeing what this community needed in more of beneath the surface, behind the scenes, what was really going on with a lot of the poverty and need.
Yeah, well, I've been here for, I guess, a little over a year, kind of listening. Okay, God, we also got pregnant, like, right as soon as we got here, pretty much. So I had that to sort of, yes, keep me busy, keep me occupied. But yeah, so when Julian was about 6 months old, we ended up having lunch with this couple, and they turned to us and said, well, you've been here a year, do you have any dreams for ministry in this area? And Richard, was still, I think, just trying to adjust to being the head of staff at a church for the first time. And so he kind of punted to me. And out came, this idea that had, I guess, been sort of forming in me for the last year about this need for a community chaplain, just because of how many people work the service industry down here who were sort of one crisis away from really being in trouble and who didn't seem, for the most part, to be connected to a church from those I was kind of encountering. And I just thought, gosh, an area like this, where there's so much in and out, so many people moving to the area, like the idea of a community chaplain just sort of struck me. And the first person I told that idea to happened to be connected to a family foundation and encouraged me to apply for a grant to get a ministry like that started. And so, again, it was like, okay, God, it's like the idea and the means just kind of all of a sudden appeared right there. And so that's how I got started. But really from the beginning, I think my goal and vision, especially after meeting with the Ministerial Alliance, was that a position like that would be best within an existing organization like Caring and Sharing. That's who the Ministerial Association. So that happened this past January. So now I'm the director of outreach, and then I kind of in parentheses the chaplain.
Right.
At Caring and Sharing.
And for those that may be listening, Caring and
Walton.
Sharing is a help organization here in Walton County that was begun by the Ministerial Association
25 or 30
years ago. I've been here 16 years, soon to be 16 years, and it was highly functioning and long-term functioning. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to yell.
You're good.
It had been functioning a long time by then.
Yeah.
And it's down on 98, and people donate clothing, and needy people get food, and there's some utility assistance in the pastors at the time. And when it did start, there's only a handful of churches in South Walton.
Right. Now there are over 30. Yeah.
Right. Right. I think there were 8 when I moved here, so a lot of these are new churches that have emerged. But we've also had a population that's almost doubled in size since I moved here, so that's not unusual. And the Ministerial Association saw that, rather than calling the first church when somebody shows up needing help, we should get together on this. And so they got together, and that's how Caring and Sharing came to be. That's really Cliff Notes version, but that's how it came to be.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been to that building over there too, you need to stop by and check it out. I don't know what the protocols are right now with COVID, but
You have to wear a mask.
yeah, it's just really cool. The setup, you walk in, there's items to purchase for people, at a lower price, and clothing upstairs, and I've been there a couple different times, but it's a really cool place. Wonderful ministry opportunity too.
Yeah, and we've really another I think kind of God thing is we've had there are 3 directors now, a new executive director, and Carly Harmer, and then a director of operations, Amaryllis Rosado, and then myself as director of outreach. So there are kind of 3 of us, and we've all been there. I think Amaryllis has been there a little over a year, and Carly and I have been there less than a year. So, and we have kind of expanded our services. So we all kind of got there right before COVID hit. And we're just kind of sort of getting figured out, what our jobs were, and then COVID hit. And so, but we were able to really use it as an opportunity to expand services. So we used to only provide financial assistance for folks in Freeport and South, but now we offer financial assistance to the whole of Walton County.
Wow.
We only used to offer utility assistance. Now we also offer rent assistance. We do some emergency shelter if somebody's homeless with a acute medical need, or they have kids or something. We're now a point of intake for the Homeless and Housing Alliance
Oh, nice.
in Walton County. So we use that shared system to get folks connected to help through that. We now have a social worker, actually 2 social workers that alternate Fridays. So they're there from 10 to 2. So now when we have clients who need mental health counseling or more like kind of extensive case management, we can get them set up for no cost to them with these social workers. They're both veterans. So, I mean, now I'm available for pastoral care if people, need prayer, want, are wrestling with some kind of theological issue that they want to talk about with somebody. I'm there. It is not a requirement to receive services, but if they ask, it's available to them now.
That's
so
fantastic.
yeah,
That's great.
and we do kind of things now like. I helped people apply for their stimulus if they were non-filers and didn't have access to a computer, food stamps. When the Walton County Emerald Coast Regional Council, offered this COVID assistance application, we would help. It's like a 20-page application, and there are all these other documents you have to have copies of and scan and send. So I have, they didn't have one in Spanish, so I pestered them for like 2 months until they made one in Spanish. We have them, people fill them out and then bring them back to us. I double check it to make sure they have everything. We scan everything, send it. We help do follow up with that. I mean, so even when we can't help or people have maxed out their assistance with us, then, we really go out of our way to connect them with other resources, whether it's another church that's decided to offer additional financial assistance or an application like this.
Are there any other ministries that do something similar like that in this area, or is that this really it?
Caring and Sharing is, I would say, really it for South Walton. The Matrix is the comparable organization in Defuniak. There's the Matrix and Caring and Sharing in Defuniak,
Right, so
and we're not related, but
right. So really, what you guys are doing at Caring and Sharing is unique and different and so needed. So, we're in month 10 now of this pandemic. How have you guys done, or how have you fared through all this? I mean, because it's been so chaotic with people getting sick.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, have you seen an uptick? Because this is a bizarre economic environment in South Walton because there is so much wealth that sometimes there's not the sense that people are hurting. But I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've spent quite. I mean, I think we spent over $100,000 on assistance alone in the first 6 months of the pandemic, and that just came actually out of our reserves. So, because we had to close our store, so we actually had over $100,000 less income this year from having to have our store closed. But we had been hoping to maybe move into a new building, and so we had been building up some reserves for that. But I mean, when this hit, we were like, yeah, what do you're not going to, it's like Jesus had something to say about that, right? About storing up your things in barns. So, so we just decided to kind of double down and expand our services. So yeah, we have seen more people. I don't know the specific numbers. I know I think for Thanksgiving, we've seen almost 100 more families for assistance. I think for Angel Tree, we've seen about 100 more kids than we saw last year. I mean, I just know every month when I do the numbers, we're adding new clients. So
there'll be a commercial on one side of this video about our ad litem program. Yeah, we're taking a couple dozen kids here at the church, and that's really the first time in 12, 13 years that we have been pressed to say, would you do, because usually this community is really good about covering all those needs, and we'll catch a few kids, but this is the most extensive request we've had at Christmas time. And I know that we have, and we're not tooting horns, but we've done the same thing out of pushing our own reserves down.
Yeah.
We've spent more this year in assistance to individuals or organizations because we know that the demand is and I don't want to, I'm not throwing stones, but if you live in a house on 30A and life is good, your bank note interest rate is low and your investments are high, you can afford to stay at home. But for the people that are cutting your grass and the people that are serving you food and this endless line of cars on 331 in the mornings of construction folks going to work and going home, they have been profoundly impacted this year. And 21 promises to not be a rose garden either, at least the first half before we have some vaccines that will begin to circulate.
And we've all had to quarantine, after exposures. I mean, even with the precautions of masks and, I mean, I try to mostly meet with clients that need extended conversation or help outdoors, but, if it's 35 degrees, you can't do that, or sometimes, you start to talk to somebody and it's a real vulnerable, and so you can't be.
You start talking and
you
only
can't
later
be
find out that,
outside, talking to somebody about some of the things that they have going on. So, but one time after sitting in my office with somebody for an hour, 2 days later, she called to say she had COVID, and so I had to be at home for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. So, and we have a staff who's been out for 2 months with it. And
how could folks help you most in your work in Caring and Sharing's work?
We definitely still need volunteers. So if you are, relatively healthy and you feel safe, like you can, be around folks with a mask, with safety, we need volunteers. And we have, some volunteer positions don't require hardly any interaction with other people. And then I think just funds, I think the more we have, the more we give away.
Yeah.
So
that sounds familiar.
And Carly and I are, we were always coming up with new ideas for ways. We started like purchasing hygiene supplies and diapers because people need it. And so we're just spending, there's always more need. So yeah, I would say finances and volunteers.
And you had a website people can find your work at?
Caring and Sharing Sowell.org.
All right, we'll make sure that gets posted. And folks can see all the work that's done there. Believe it or not, 45 minutes has passed.
Yeah, I have some great questions left.
I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to stop our video here.
Yeah.
And we'll ask those questions and maybe have a second little redo of a few minutes, okay? Bye, y'all. We watched it again with you. It's the first time that we've actually watched it without being there, and I picked up about a dozen more things I didn't catch the first time.
It's such a great interview.
Easy to interview. Her energy is incredible. Her passion, her conversion.
Yeah, her
very,
story.
Very unorthodox conversion, a very unorthodox path. Mm-hmm. Hey, Beverly, thank you for that question. I don't have a lot of money to give, but I can give time. How do I sign up?
Great question.
Post throughout the video that there was the Caring and Sharing website. Start there. It's www.caringandsharingsoulwall.org. So Beverly, if you'll start right there, that's a good place to begin. And just let them know you heard Emily's interview, and she'll be happy to help you out. It's so interesting. I believe it was you, Beverly, that said you volunteered there when you were a teenager, which is fantastic. That's how the lifeblood of that organization. And so appreciation to Emily and Garrett setting all this up and, as always, running the technology. And I loved it. All of our Q&As and our interviews, this is session 28.
Yeah, session 28.
Have been so enjoyable. We started doing these Q&As on Wednesday night just to as a bridge to get back to when we would be back in service together in 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. 28 sessions later. And here we are. And
28 sessions later.
As you can see, we've had them at the church. We've had them at my house that I've now sold. We've now in Garrett's house. We might even be hanging around at my new house at some point.
We might be at. We went to Doug's house. We might be at someone else's house.
So we're not finished. We've got some other great content coming, as we talked about earlier. And just thanks so much for watching with us tonight. And I hope you can support Emily's work. And you'll sometimes see her in the community, and she won't just be wearing a T-shirt. She'll actually be wearing a clerical collar on occasion. So she's easy to spot when she's like that. And I hope that if you see her, you'll encourage her.
Hey, Emily.
Hey, and Emily just posted. So she's been sneakily watching in the background there. Call Caring and Sharing and tell Amaria. Is that how? Pronounce that for me, because I don't have my glasses on. I hate to admit that, but I am going to admit it, that if I don't see that, if you want to volunteer, and there's the phone number. So Beverly, that's.
I don't want to butcher the name.
I want to do it.
Amarilli?
Give it its justice. But Emily, thank you. Thank you for tuning in and for giving us that additional information. And thank you, Andrea, and for that comment, and everybody that joined us tonight. So anything else to wrap up before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I've met Emily a couple different times, but this was my first time sitting down with her and being able to listen and ask some questions. And like you said at the end of that video, we have a part 2.
That's right. We have a part 2.
25 more minutes of just
theological explorations.
Yeah, a
with
little
Emily
bit, yeah.
Proctor, and more of her story. And we'll put that. We're going to drop that in as bonus content at some point.
At some point. We don't know when, but yeah, that'll be a treat. But yeah, thank you again, everybody, and thank you again, Emily, for taking the time. And yeah, that was just enjoyable.
That's right. And we'll see you Sunday live at 10 o'clock for the second week of Advent.
9:30.
Excuse me, 9:30. See how programmed I am? 9:30. 9:30 Sunday morning.
11:15.
And 11:15 we'll be launching live. And for all of you that are watching, thank you so much, and thank you for staying connected. We'll see you next time.
Was a time of the preacher when the story begun. The choice of a woman and the love of a man, and how he loved her so dearly, he went out of his mind. Well, she left him